They say the biggest betrayals don't start with shouting matches or slammed doors, they start with quiet things. A pause in a sentence. A misplaced item. A change you can't name but you feel. That morning was already a wreck. My flight to Dallas was in 3 hours and I was running behind after hitting snooze one too many times. Our dog, Murphy, had thrown up something horrific on the carpet. I was half-dressed, wrestling with a tie that suddenly felt more like a noose when I walked into the kitchen and saw it. Bailey's handbag. It sat on the edge of the counter, slouched over like a passed-out guest after a party. That bag went with her everywhere. No exaggeration. I've seen her take it to yoga, to get the mail, into the shower once because she didn't trust leaving it in the car. So seeing it there, alone, unguarded, felt like catching your reflection blinking out of sync in the mirror. At first, I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at it while the coffee machine groaned in the background. I tried to dismiss it. Told myself maybe she just forgot it this one time. But my gut disagreed. There was a weight in my chest I couldn't explain. And then I opened it. I'm not proud of that. I wish I could say I had the moral high ground that I respected her privacy. But something primal kicked in. Like I was hunting something I didn't know existed until that second. Inside the bag, buried under a tangle of gum wrappers, receipts, and the chaos of everyday life, was a small velvet box. I held it in my hand like it was radioactive. When I opened it, time slowed. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, thin, simple, elegant. I wouldn't have looked at it twice, except for what was etched into the inside. Forever yours, B. I read it once. Then again. My name isn't Bailey. And I sure as hell didn't give her this. I put the box back in the bag, zipped it up carefully, and stood there for a full minute trying to remember how to breathe. I poured the coffee I no longer wanted into a travel mug and leaned on the counter like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Bailey came downstairs a few minutes later, already dressed. Hair curled just the way she liked it, effortless, like she wasn't trying. She wore one of those blouses with the little gold buttons she only pulled out for nights with the girls. Her makeup was fresh. Too fresh for a random Tuesday morning. She smiled at me like nothing was out of the ordinary. Like I hadn't just found a loaded secret in her purse. You're still here? She asked, grabbing a banana from the bowl beside me. I nodded slowly. Running late. She kissed me on the cheek, quick and cool. Text me when you land. I picked up her bag gently and held it out to her. You forgot this. That was the first crack. It lasted half a second, maybe less. Her face froze before she smiled, too bright. Oh. Thanks. I meant to leave it, actually. Emily's birthday is coming up, I got her something. Really? I said, watching her. What did you get her? A bracelet, she said smoothly, sliding the strap over her shoulder. It's nothing fancy. Just thought it would be sweet. I nodded again. That's thoughtful of you. Then I watched her walk out the door. Emily is her old college roommate. Lives in Boston. Bailey hasn't seen her in over a year. And when I texted Emily later that day, she had no idea what I was talking about. There was no birthday. No planned visit. No bracelet. The rest of the morning passed in a fog. I packed like I was moving through syrup, every motion mechanical. I kept replaying the exchange in my head, searching for signs I missed. I checked her calendar. It said she had a spa appointment and then lunch with the girls. No names, just girls. It was the same script she'd been running for months. For the past few weeks, she'd been coming home later than usual. Not dramatically late, just off enough to make you wonder. Traffic was awful. Lindsay needed to vent. I stopped to get wine. Excuses that sounded harmless on the surface but didn't sit right in my gut. I tried to ignore it at first. I really did. But things had changed. She used to hum when she cooked. Now she scrolled TikTok with her earbuds in. She used to send me texts just because, funny memes, little I miss you messages. Lately her phone was always face down. Always on silent. Always just out of reach. We hadn't been fighting. Not really. No dramatic blow-ups or shouting matches. But there was distance. And I guess I thought it was just a phase. Stress. Work. A lull we'd ride through. But that bracelet changed everything. I wish I could say I confronted her right away. Demanded answers. But I didn't. I flew to Dallas that afternoon and did my job like nothing was wrong. Smiled, shook hands, climbed a few hundred feet into the Texas sky like I wasn't carrying a secret that felt heavier than the harness strapped to my chest. That night in the hotel room, I laid on the bed and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. A message from Bailey. How's the trip? Miss you already. Face-blowing kiss. I didn't reply. Because something had shifted. Some internal alarm had gone off, and once you hear it, you can't pretend it didn't ring. The betrayal hadn't happened yet. Or maybe it had, and I just hadn't caught up to it. But the moment I saw that bracelet, everything we had started to tilt. Just enough to notice. I didn't know where this was headed yet, but I knew one thing for sure. The woman I married was hiding something, and I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. The highway stretched out ahead of me like a gray ribbon unraveling beneath the wheels of my rental. It was just past 7 in the morning, and I had 2 hours before I had to meet the crew out by the tower site on the edge of Dallas. But I wasn't focused on the job. Not really. My hands were on the wheel. My eyes watched the road. But my mind? It was back home with her. I don't know if it was the bracelet that triggered it or if that was just the final straw. But ever since I zipped up that bag, my memory had turned against me. It started stitching things together, frayed threads I'd ignored for too long suddenly tightening into a pattern I couldn't unsee. It started small. A few months back, Bailey stopped waiting up for me when I worked late. She used to do that, curl up on the couch with a blanket and a glass of wine, pretending to watch Netflix until I walked through the door. But lately, I'd come home to lights off, doors locked, and her already in bed. And her scent, her perfume. That faint vanilla and sandalwood trail she left behind like a calling card? It had changed. I didn't notice it at first, but now I could tell it wasn't hers anymore. Or maybe it was something she wore when she wasn't my Bailey. I thought about the time just 3 weeks ago when she said she was staying with her sister, Jamie, for a weekend. Said they were having a mental health girls retreat. I'd nodded and told her to enjoy herself. Didn't even question it. But 2 days later, my own sister, Mel, casually mentioned spotting Bailey at a motel on the east side of town, alone, she said, but kind of dressed up and moving quick. I'd laughed it off. Said Mel probably mistook someone else. Bailey was supposed to be in the mountains with her sister, after all. Why would she be near a motel? But now that bracelet had cracked something wide open. It made me realize that all these things, these little, quiet inconsistencies, weren't scattered dots. They were coordinates. And I had been ignoring the map. I pulled into a gas station just outside of Irving, the kind that sold stale donuts and cigarettes behind a scratched-up plexiglass barrier. I filled the tank and stood there for a moment, staring out across the lot at nothing in particular. I opened my phone and scrolled through recent texts from Bailey. They read like a script. Predictable, short. Nothing real. There was one from 2 nights ago. Long day. Exhausted. Don't wait up. Love you. Sent at 9:04 p.m. I checked my Ring camera history from that night. She left the house again at 9:26 p.m. Never came back until after 1 a.m. She never mentioned that part. I could feel my stomach churning again, and not from the gas station coffee. I leaned back against the car and tried to remember the last time I felt truly connected to her. The last time we'd sat on the back patio talking about nothing and everything. The last time she reached for my hand just because. I couldn't. It wasn't just what she was doing. It was how she'd pulled away from me in layers, like peeling an onion I never realized was rotting underneath. And I'd been too busy or too trusting or maybe just too scared to stop her. The meeting at the site was just noise in my ears. I went through the motions, inspected bolts, reviewed crane access logs, made small talk with a project manager named Carter who kept telling me about his son's baseball stats. I nodded at all the right times, smiled when I needed to, but my brain was spinning in a completely different orbit. I kept thinking about the way Bailey had started dressing. She used to keep it casual unless we were going out, jeans, sweatshirts, maybe a messy bun. Comfortable. Familiar. But lately her wardrobe had taken a sharp left turn. Leather skirts. Bold reds. High heels to get coffee. And her makeup more intense. Smoky eyes. Lips darker than she used to wear, like she was trying on someone else's personality. And her voice, this one was harder to explain, but I felt it in my bones. The way she spoke to me had changed. It used to be soft even when she was irritated. Now it was clipped. Cleaner. Like she was talking to a stranger she was trying not to offend. I knew that tone. I used that tone when I didn't want to share too much with someone. When I was hiding something. The real gut punch came later that night, back at the hotel. I ordered room service, barely touched my food, and opened up her Instagram. Bailey wasn't a huge poster, but when she did post, she made it count. Usually curated sh*ts of brunches, sunsets, motivational quotes. But I noticed something. The tags were vanishing. She used to tag me in everything. #hubbygoals. #myrock. All that performative romance. Yeah? Nothing. Her last 3 posts, one at a wine bar, one in a boutique hotel lobby, and one in a parked car with city lights behind her, had no tags. No captions that mentioned me. I clicked on the car photo. She wore a black dress I'd never seen before. One hand in her lap. the other on the thigh of someone cropped out of frame. Just barely visible was the edge of a navy blue suit pant leg and a gold watch. It wasn't mine. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. That tiny edge of wrist said more than 1,000 words. She had someone else in the car. And she wanted it just vague enough to get away with it, or maybe she wanted to get caught. I called Mel later that night. Told her casually, "Hey, remember that time you saw Bailey near that motel?" She hesitated, then said, "Yeah." "Why?" "No reason," I lied. "Just wondering if you were sure it was her." "I'm sure. She was wearing the green dress with the back cut out. The one she wore to your anniversary dinner last year." And there it was again, another crack. Back home, I imagined Bailey doing whatever she wanted. Probably on the couch, legs tucked under her, texting someone else while the TV played on mute. She used to tell me everything. Even the small things. Now I couldn't remember the last time we'd had a real conversation. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living with a stranger wearing my wife's skin. By the time I went to bed, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to bring it up, not yet. Whatever this was, I needed more than instinct. More than my gut. I needed facts. Hard ones. Something that couldn't be denied, manipulated, or explained away. I was going to find the truth. And when I did, I wouldn't ask her why. I'd just make sure she knew I already knew. The trip wrapped a day early. We'd finished the inspection ahead of schedule, and Carter practically insisted I take the next morning off. "You've earned it," he said, handing me a bottle of cheap bourbon like we were old friends. I nodded, thanked him, and gave him a half smile. But the moment I stepped back into my rental, the only thing I wanted was to get home. I didn't call Bailey to tell her I was returning early. Something inside me told me not to. Not yet. I needed to see things as they were, not how she'd prepare them to look if she knew I was coming. That difference, I suspected, was everything. I drove back in silence, no music, no podcasts. Just the hum of the tires and the slow crawl of my thoughts keeping time with the highway mile markers. By the time I pulled into our neighborhood, it was just after 9. Night had fully settled. Porch lights were glowing up and down the block, and the late spring breeze carried the sound of sprinklers hissing across lawns. Everything looked so normal. Picture perfect. If you glance at our home, white siding, tidy hedges, soft yellow light leaking from the upstairs window, you'd think this was the kind of place where love lived. But I had a feeling that something else had taken up residence while I was away. I didn't park in the driveway. I pulled around the corner, a block down, and cut the engine. My heart was pounding like it used to before a big climb, right before you step off the edge and trust that the cable will hold. I walked slow. The familiar rhythm of my boots on the sidewalk made it feel almost peaceful. I stayed to the side, under the cover of trees, out of view from anyone inside. When I reached our front yard, I paused. I looked up at the bedroom window. The curtains weren't fully closed. They never were. Bailey liked the morning light too much to bother drawing them all the way. I stepped quietly onto the grass, heart racing harder now, and found the angle. There she was, sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing the green dress, that dress. The one Mel saw her in near the motel. Her legs were tucked to one side. Her back was partially to the window, and she was laughing. Not smiling. Not politely chuckling. Laughing, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. Not with me, at least. Then I saw him. He was standing beside her, shirt slightly unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up like he lived there. In his hand was the jewelry box, the same one I had found in her purse. He opened it and said something I couldn't hear, and she playfully reached for it, her fingers brushing his. And then they kissed. Not the kind of kiss that said we made a mistake. Not the kind of kiss that carried guilt or fear. This was soft. Familiar. Like it was part of a routine. Like they had done it 100 times before. I stood there, frozen in the dark. My hands clenched at my sides. My breath caught in my throat like I'd swallowed glass. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was where it happened. Our bed. Our home. Our bedroom, the place where Bailey and I had shared everything from Sunday mornings with coffee to whispered midnight promises. It was now a stage for someone else's in * Macy. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't pound on the window or charge through the door. I just turned around and walked back the way I came. I made it halfway down the street before my knees almost gave out. I leaned against the nearest tree and stayed there, breathing in the bark, the dirt, the reality. I had spent months second-guessing myself, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. That love meant trust. But what I saw tonight didn't leave room for doubt. She wasn't confused. She wasn't lonely. She had moved on while keeping one foot in our house, our marriage, like it was just a backup plan. Back in the car, I sat in the dark with my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles whitened. The bourbon Carter gave me sat untouched in the passenger seat. I could have opened it, drank the whole thing, called her. Stormed back in. But I didn't. I drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town and checked in using a fake name. When the clerk asked how many nights, I said just one, though I already knew it wouldn't be the last. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, staring at the blank wall, my thoughts a storm. I thought about how she kissed him the same way she used to kiss me. How she let him into our bed like she didn't care who she had to lie to for comfort. I thought about the way she laughed. And how I hadn't heard that sound in what felt like forever. It wasn't just cheating. It wasn't just the physical act. It was emotional theft. It was deliberate. The *Macy they shared was the kind of thing you build slowly with trust, vulnerability, time. She'd given that to him now. In the same space where I had once given it to her. I laid back and stared at the ceiling. My mind didn't race. It didn't spiral. It just clicked into place. Whatever this was, it wasn't an accident. She had made a choice. And I was about to make mine. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there in that stale motel bed, staring at a crack in the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional car peeling down the highway outside. My eyes didn't close. Not because of rage or heartbreak or anything poetic. Just numbness. I felt like my soul had been drained out of me and all that was left was silence. And in that silence I started thinking. Not about her. Not anymore. I started thinking about me. For months I'd been living like a shadow in my own life. Like I was background noise in a relationship that used to feel like home. I'd been told, without words, that I didn't matter anymore. That my role was to keep the lights on, smile when prompted, and disappear when it wasn't convenient. But I was done being the unaware husband. The backup plan. The polite fool. By the time morning light started bleeding through the curtain, something had shifted in me. Not emotionally, I was still numb. But logically. Strategically. If she could lie to my face, laugh in our bed with someone else, and carry on like I didn't exist, then I could do the same, in my own way. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't storm. I would outthink. Outmaneuver. I would protect what was mine. And when the time came, I'd leave nothing for her to rewrite. I checked out of the motel just after 7 and drove to a strip mall across town where no one knew me. I found a coffee shop with weak Wi-Fi and fewer questions. I opened my laptop and started combing through our financial records. Bailey and I shared everything: joint checking, shared savings, credit cards, auto pay on the mortgage. But I'd always been the one who handled the paperwork. And thank God for that. In a matter of hours, I had made copies of every document I could find. Bank statements, retirement accounts, tax returns, pay stubs, even utility bills. I created encrypted backups and uploaded them to a cloud folder she didn't know existed. By noon, I had opened a new checking account in my name only. By 2 p.m. I had contacted a lawyer. I didn't go into detail. Just gave him the basics: married 10 years, no kids, joint property, possible infidelity. He asked if I had proof. I said not yet. But I would. He told me to sit tight. Not to make any rash moves. To start gathering, documenting, keeping my head down. I said, that's exactly what I'm doing. When I finally pulled back into our driveway later that evening, I felt like I was watching someone else's house. Like the place I used to live had been replaced with a well-decorated illusion. Her car was in the garage. Porch light on. Inside, everything probably looked as it always had. But I knew better now. I walked in like nothing had changed. Bailey was in the kitchen, scrolling her phone, wine glass half full. She glanced up and blinked like she hadn't expected me to walk through the door. "You're back early," she said. I smiled. "Yeah, finished ahead of schedule. Figured I'd surprise you." She smiled, that fake one I used to think was real. "Well, surprise. We didn't talk about much that night." She asked how the job went. I gave vague answers. She laughed at something on her phone and pretended it wasn't from someone she wasn't supposed to be talking to. But I watched her. I watched the way she kept her phone screen tilted away from me. The way she never asked follow-ups. The way she stayed on one side of the couch and didn't even try to bridge the gap. She thought I didn't know. That I was just the same guy who kissed her goodbye every Monday and trusted her every Friday. She didn't know I'd already made the first move. Over the next few days, I became a ghost collector, drifting through my own house, picking up on every little detail she didn't mean to leave behind. I started recording receipts. I'd check the mileage on her car every night. I'd know what shoes she wore out and compare them to what was in the closet the next morning. I wasn't obsessive, I was methodical. I was building a record, one silent truth at a time. I created a document on a password-protected drive. Evidence_01. I started small. A picture of the bracelet. A **T of her Instagram post in the car with that suited thigh and gold watch just visible. The ring footage showing her leaving the house late at night. A printout of our calendar showing she was with her sister the weekend Mel saw her near a motel. Then I called a PI. It felt surreal, saying the words out loud, "I think my wife is cheating." The guy on the other end didn't flinch. His name was Sutter. He'd been doing this for 18 years. Quiet. Professional. No drama. He asked for dates, times, locations. I gave him everything I could. He told me he'd start right away. "You want confrontation?" he asked. "No," I said. "I want confirmation." He paused. "That's rare. Most guys want blood." "Not me," I said. "I want clean." The rest of the week I played my role to perfection. I came home at the usual time. I asked about her day. I pretended not to notice when she faked a smile. When she said she was having lunch with a friend, I said, "Have fun." When she left the room to answer a call, I didn't follow. But every word she said, every look she gave, I cataloged. She was playing a part. But so was I. And unlike her, I had an exit plan. That weekend, I moved a few key things to storage, nothing she'd notice. My passport. Important documents. Backup drives. I told her I was decluttering. She nodded and didn't press. She never had much interest in what I did with the files or mail anyway. By the end of the week, I had every financial asset shielded. I'd split our direct deposits. Canceled a shared credit card under the pretense of fraud. Replaced our mortgage password. Changed my emergency contacts at work. The only thing I hadn't touched was the confrontation. And I wouldn't, not yet. Because now every day I stayed quiet was one more page in the story I was building. One more log entry. One more time-stamped moment proving just how far gone she already was. And every time she laughed at her phone, every time she kissed me like it was just something to check off her list, every time she lied to my face with a voice so smooth it made me sick, I smiled. Because I was no longer the man being betrayed. I was the man preparing for checkmate. And she didn't even know the game had started. It only took 5 days. Sutter, the private investigator, didn't waste time. He called me on a Thursday afternoon, midday, while I was at work reviewing crane specs for a refinery expansion project in Baytown. I stepped outside the office trailer, wind cutting through my shirt, and picked up on the third ring. "You're going to want to sit down," he said. "I'm already standing," I replied. "Fair enough." There was a pause. "Her name's all over it, Ellis. I've got footage, timestamps, audio. A guy named Brandon. Drives a gray Audi. Been using your house as their weekend getaway every time you're on the road." My throat went dry. Sutter continued like he was reading a grocery list. "He stays over. Multiple nights. Comes and goes freely. Security footage from 2 neighbors matches mine. I even ran a plate. His registration pulls up in your zip code every Friday after 5. I didn't say anything. Just listened. "There's more," he said. "I have audio. One of them left their phone on speaker during a conversation. I bugged the car in your driveway, legal, by the way, you're the homeowner, and picked up about 20 minutes of conversation." My stomach twisted. They talked about you. Not just around you, about you. Strategies. How to get out clean. How to provoke you. "Provoke me?" I asked, the word sharp in my mouth. To get a reaction. Something angry. Something they could use in court in case things got ugly. Her words, not mine. She's been feeding him details, what you make, what you might be entitled to if you filed first, even how much is in the joint account. I turned and looked out over the lot. Guys in hard hats passed by, laughing, shouting, oblivious to the fact that my entire life had just been reclassified into before and after. "Send me everything," I said. "You'll have it by tonight. Photos, audio, documents. I'll upload it all into a secure drive and text you the link. Password protected." "And Brandon," I said. "Anything else on him?" "Full name is Brandon Keller. 34. Used to work for a real estate firm 2 counties over. Lost his license over a fraudulent transaction last year. Now he's doing freelance appraisal work, unlicensed, off the books. Bailey met him at a pop-up gallery in the city. At least, that's the story she told him. She called it a clean slate moment. Clean slate. The word sat in my chest like ice. I hung up without another word and stood there staring at the dirt like it owed me an apology. That night, I waited until Bailey was asleep, curled on her side in our bed, breathing softly like the world wasn't cracking beneath her feet, and I sat in the living room, laptop open, headphones in. Sutter hadn't been kidding. The footage was clear. Audio sharp. There they were, sitting in our kitchen. My kitchen. He poured wine into the glasses I bought last Christmas, and she was wearing one of my old sweatshirts like it belonged to her new life. "Ellis is too passive," she said, laughing. "I don't think he'll fight it." Still, Brandon said, "We need to plan for the worst." You sure the finances are separated enough? I'm working on it. He doesn't know I opened another card under my name only. And he still has the utilities on autopay under his account. If I can get him to snap just once, we can say it was emotional distress. It plays better in court. I hit pause. I couldn't breathe for a full 30 seconds. Not only were they stealing from me, they were plotting to *P***nize me. For the first time since this started, I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Not grief. Not betrayal. Disgust. They were sitting in my house, planning their future while rehearsing how to make me look like the villain. Like I was some unpredictable brute who'd left them no choice but to twist the knife. That night changed something in me. Permanently. I made a final list, things to secure, things to change, moves to make. I knew better than to confront her now. She wanted that. She needed a confrontation to justify whatever story she was going to tell next. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I did the one thing she hadn't counted on. I moved in silence. By the end of the weekend, I had hired a second attorney for strategy confirmation, drafted an inventory of all shared possessions, moved key personal items and documents into offsite storage, changed all passwords, cloud accounts, financial portals, even the garage opener. Installed hidden cameras in the hallway and home office legally mine to place. She didn't notice. She was too busy pretending. The weird part? Living in that house side by side felt eerily normal. Like we were just two coworkers who happened to sleep under the same roof. She smiled more. Touched me more. Asked questions like, how was work, and want anything from the store. It was a performance. She thought I was buying it. But every word she said, every gesture, I recorded. She even said, I love you one night. And I said it back. It nearly choked me. But I knew what I was doing. I wasn't being weak. I was being surgical. The final blow came one night when I reviewed the latest footage from the hallway cam. Brandon entered the house with a key. A key. I'd never given anyone else a spare. Not even family. The next morning, I changed the locks while she was out grabbing coffee. When she came back and it didn't work, she called me, sounding confused. Hey, my key's not working? Huh, I said. Weird. I had to rekey the front door. The deadbolt was acting up. I must have forgotten to update your copy. My bad. She hesitated. Okay. Can I get a new one? Sure, I said. Remind me tonight. But I never handed her one. She didn't ask again. Maybe she knew. Maybe not. But either way, the game was mine now. The illusion was intact. The plan was set. And the next time Brandon walked into my house, he'd be stepping into a trap so well lit it might as well have been a courtroom. They wanted to provoke me? Good. Because I had already set the terms. I wasn't breaking down. I was locking in. An hour before their lawyer meeting, I slipped into the kitchen and tucked a velvet box deep into her purse. Not the bracelet. Something older, our wedding ring. Inside, I'd re-engraved it with our anniversary date and the words, I was here. No threats. No anger. Just truth. She found it moments before leaving. She never made it to the meeting. Instead, she disappeared for 3 days, no texts, no calls. When she finally did message me, her words were hollow. I need time to think. But I didn't respond. Not because I was angry. Because I was done. The divorce went through quietly. No drama. She didn't fight. Maybe the silence scared her more than shouting ever could. She took only what was hers. I kept the house. But it wasn't mine anymore, not the us version anyway. I stripped it down, room by room, until only I remained. Weeks later, I moved to the coast, accepted a job building towers near the water. Each day, I climbed higher, past steel and glass, into clean air. Bailey became a story. The ring? A closed chapter. And me? I was finally free.